Stop the wedding.
You cannot
Every head
do
in the
this!
church turned. The organ music died mid-note. Amara stood frozen at the altar, veil trembling against
This
her
wedding
face,
cannot
and for
happen.
one long second nobody breathed. Min-Jun, she whispered. What are you doing here? He didn't answer her. His eyes were locked on her wrist, on the thin gold bracelet catching the light from the stained glass windows. Where did you get that? Her hand flew to cover it. It doesn't matter. It matters. His voice cracked. I buried that bracelet with my brother 3 years ago.
I never wanted it to end like this.
Behind them, an old woman rose slowly from the front pew. Silver-haired, dressed in black, her presence alone made the entire congregation go still. She looked at Amara like she was seeing a ghost. She's not who you think she is, the woman said quietly. None of you know what she really did. Somewhere in Amara's clutch bag, hidden beneath white silk, a phone buzzed once. A single text. A name flashed on the screen, a name that belonged to a man everyone in that church believed was dead. Nobody watching that wedding knew the truth yet. Not even Amara herself. Before we go back to where it all began, drop a comment and let me know, where are you watching from tonight? I read every single one. 3 years earlier, Amara Johnson was nobody special, and she liked it that way. She worked the night desk at Cho Tower, a glass building downtown that never seemed to sleep, answering phones for executives who never learned her name. She was 31, a widow, raising her daughter Zoe alone since her husband died in what the police called a car accident. She kept her head down. She did her job. She went home. That was the plan anyway, until the night everything changed. It was almost 11 when the elevator doors opened and a man stumbled into the lobby, one hand pressed hard against his side, blood soaking through his white shirt. Amara jumped up from her chair so fast it rolled backward and hit the wall. Sir? Sir, you're bleeding. Don't call anyone. His voice was low, urgent, barely holding together. Please. Don't call security. Don't call the police. You need a hospital. I need 5 minutes. He looked at her properly then, and something in his eyes made her stomach turn over, not fear exactly, but exhaustion, like a man who had been running his whole life and finally stopped to catch his breath in the wrong place. Please. Amara had spent 3 years training herself not to get involved in anything, not to ask questions, not to notice things. But something about the way he said please, like it cost him everything to say it, made her move before she could think better of it. She locked the front doors, pulled him into the little supply room behind the reception desk, got the first aid kit down from the shelf with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. This is going to hurt, she said, pressing gauze against the wound. Everything hurts already. He almost laughed, but it turned into a wince. You're not scared of me. Should I be? Everyone else is. She looked up at him properly for the first time. Handsome in a tired, dangerous sort of way, with a scar along his jaw that looked old and one across his ribs that looked new. I don't know who you are, she said honestly. That's probably safer for you. Try me anyway. He studied her for a long moment, like he was deciding something important. Min-Jun Cho, he finally said. This is my family's building. Amara's hands stilled over the bandage. Everyone who worked in that tower had heard whispers about the Cho family, whispers that never got said out loud in daylight, whispers about the kind of business that happened behind locked doors on the top floors. She swallowed hard and kept working. You're not going to run, he said, surprised. Where would I run to? You're bleeding on my supply room floor. She tied off the bandage and sat back on her heels. There. That should hold till you get real help. He caught her wrist gently before she could pull away, and for a second neither of them moved. Thank you, he said, and it sounded like he meant it more than the words could hold. You just made yourself a target, though. Do you understand what you've done? I bandaged a cut. That's all I did. That's not all you did. His eyes were serious now, almost sad. People who help me don't get to walk away clean. Not in my world. Somewhere down the hallway, a door slammed. Min-Jun went rigid, listening, one hand already reaching for something at his belt. You need to forget you saw me tonight, he said quickly. For your own sake. I don't even know your last name is really Cho. It is. And that's exactly why you need to forget it. He was already moving toward the fire exit, pressing a hand to his side, favoring his left leg. At the door he paused and looked back at her, like he was memorizing her face. "What's your name?" "Amara." He said it once under his breath, like he was testing how it felt. "Amara." Then he was gone, swallowed by the stairwell shadows, and she stood alone in the empty lobby with blood on her hands and 1,000 questions she knew better than to ask out loud. She told herself she'd never see him again. She was wrong. 2 nights later, a black car was waiting outside her apartment building when her shift ended. The window rolled down, and there he was, healthier now, dressed like the wealthy man he apparently was instead of the wounded stranger from the supply room. "You following me now?" Amara asked, arms crossed, though her heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "I came to say thank you properly." He held up a small paper bag. "And to apologize for bleeding on your floor." "Is that supposed to be funny?" "A little." A real smile this time, softer than she expected from a man his family's reputation suggested he should be. "Can I buy you coffee?" "Just coffee. Nothing complicated." Amara looked at him for a long moment, at the careful way he held himself, like a man used to watching every exit in a room, and the way his eyes never quite left her face, like she was something he hadn't expected to find. "Nothing complicated," she repeated, like she didn't quite believe him. "I promise." She should have said no. Every instinct she'd built over 3 years of careful, quiet living told her to say no. "Fine," she said instead. "But you're paying." He laughed, really laughed, and something about the sound of it settled warm in her chest. The first time in years a stranger had made her feel like maybe she wasn't invisible after all. Neither of them knew yet how far that 1 cup of coffee would carry them, or how much blood, betrayal, and buried truth was waiting on the road ahead. If this story already has you hooked, hit subscribe now, because things are about to get a lot more dangerous, and you don't want to miss what happens next. The coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into phone calls that stretched past midnight. Amara told herself it was harmless, that a woman raising a daughter alone was allowed one small, warm thing in her life, even if that thing wore expensive suits and never quite explained where he disappeared to for days at a time. A few weeks later, Min-Jun showed up at the tower again, this time with no blood on his shirt, just a quiet urgency in his eyes. "I need you to trust me," he said, standing too close to her desk for it to be casual. "I need you to pack a bag tonight. You and Zoe." Amara's stomach dropped. "Why would I do that?" "Because someone followed you home yesterday." His jaw tightened. "Someone connected to my family's business. And if they know you helped me, they'll assume you know things you don't." "Min-Jun, you're scaring me." "Good." His voice softened, but the fear in his eyes didn't. "I need you scared enough to listen to me. Please, Amara. I can't lose someone else because of this life." Something in the way he said someone else caught in her chest like a hook. "Who did you lose?" He didn't answer right away. "Not tonight," he said quietly. "Tonight I just need you safe." She packed a bag. The safe house was nothing like she expected, warm, lived in, with soft lighting and a kitchen that smelled like someone actually cooked there. Min-Jun's mother, Min-Jun Cho, was waiting in the living room when they arrived, and the moment her eyes landed on Amara, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "So this is her," Min-Jun said, circling Amara slowly, studying her the way a jeweler studies a stone for flaws. "The receptionist." "Mother, don't. I'm simply looking." Min-Jun's gaze didn't waver. "Every woman who has loved my son has left this family in one of 2 ways. In a coffin, or with a settlement check and a signature promising her silence. Which one do you think you'll be?" "Mother." Min-Jun's voice cracked like a whip. "That's enough." Amara's chin lifted despite the fear pooling in her stomach. "I didn't ask to love your son," she said, steady despite the shake in her hands. "I bandaged a stranger's wound because it was the right thing to do. Everything after that has been his choice, not mine." Something flickered in Min-Jun's expression, not warmth, but something close to surprise. She turned and left the room without another word. Later that night, after Zoe had fallen asleep in the guest bedroom, Amara found Min-Jun sitting alone on the back porch, staring at nothing. "Your mother hates me." "My mother is afraid," he said quietly. "There's a difference, even if it doesn't feel like it." "Afraid of what?" He was quiet for a long moment. Afraid of watching me love someone the way my father loved her. Recklessly. Completely. He looked over at Amara, and his eyes were unbearably soft in the porch light. I understand if that scares you too. It does, Amara admitted. But I'm still here. He reached over and laced his fingers through hers, slow and careful, like he was asking permission with every inch. Then stay, he said simply. Not because it's safe. Because I don't think I know how to do any of this without you anymore. For a moment, everything else disappeared, the danger, the family, the unanswered questions. Just two people on a porch, holding on to something neither of them fully understood yet. A few days later, that fragile piece shattered. Amara was searching Min-Jun's study for a phone charger when she found a locked drawer slightly ajar. Inside was a manila folder, and the name typed across the top of the first page stopped her heart cold. David Johnson. Her husband's name. Her dead husband's name, sitting inside a file in the home of the man she was falling in love with. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Photographs. Surveillance photographs of David, taken months before the accident that killed him. A shipping manifest with his signature on it. And a single handwritten note in the margin that read, in Korean, "He knows too much. Handle it." She was still standing there, folder shaking in her hands, when Min-Jun walked in. Amara. His face went pale. That's not what it looks like. Then tell me what it looks like. Her voice broke. Because right now it looks like your family had something to do with my husband's death. I didn't know, he said desperately, closing the distance between them. Amara, I swear to you, I didn't know that file existed until this moment. But someone in your family did. Tears blurred her vision. Someone in your family knew, and I've been sleeping under their roof. Let me find out the truth. Please. Give me that. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the desk between them. A text from an unknown number. 3 words that made the room tilt sideways beneath her feet. We have Zoe. If your heart just dropped reading that, imagine how Amara felt. Drop a like right now if you're desperate to know what happens next, and comment below, do you think Min-Jun already knew the truth, or was he really in the dark? I want to hear your theory before we continue. The next few hours would test everything Amara thought she understood about love, loyalty, and how far a mother would go to protect what was left of her family. But that's a story for the next part. Amara's scream tore through the study. Zoe. They have Zoe. Min-Jun grabbed the phone from her shaking hands, reading the message twice like the words might change if he looked hard enough. Where was she last? With the sitter at the safe house, Amara couldn't breathe. Min-Jun, if anything happens to her. Nothing is going to happen to her. He was already moving, pulling his jacket on, dialing someone with a hand that wasn't quite steady either. I promise you, Amara. I will burn this entire family down before I let anyone touch that little girl. They drove through the night in silence, fear sitting between them thicker than any argument could. When they reached the safe house, the sitter was tied to a kitchen chair, crying, unharmed but terrified, and a single note sat on the counter in place of the child who should have been sleeping upstairs. Bring the file. Bring yourself. Come alone or you'll never see her again. There was an address. An old shipping warehouse near the docks Amara had never heard of and Min-Jun clearly knew too well. That belongs to the Wei family, he said quietly, jaw tight with fury. Rivals of my father's for 20 years. If they have Zoe, it's not about ransom. It's about hurting me the way they think my family hurt them. Then let's go get her. Amara, this is exactly the kind of danger I tried to keep you away from. She's my daughter. Amara's voice didn't waver, even though everything inside her was breaking apart. I am not staying behind while strangers decide what happens to my child. Something in her voice must have convinced him, because he didn't argue again. He simply nodded, called 2 numbers she didn't recognize, and drove. The warehouse was cold and half-lit, shadows stretching long across concrete floors. A man Amara didn't recognize stood near a metal table, and behind him, small and frightened but unharmed, sat Zoe, clutching a stuffed rabbit someone had at least been kind enough to let her keep. Mommy? Zoe's voice cracked the silence. Stay where you are, little one, the man said calmly, one hand resting near his belt. Let the grown-ups talk first. Min-Jun stepped forward, chin high, voice steady despite the fury simmering underneath. Let her go. You wanted me here. I'm here. I wanted the file too. You'll get it once my daughter is safe, Amara said, surprising herself with how firm her voice came out. Not before. The man studied her for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his face. You have fire, he said finally. David always did like fire in a woman. Amara went still. You knew my husband. I worked with your husband. Before your husband decided honesty mattered more than loyalty and told the wrong people what he knew about a shipment that wasn't supposed to exist. His eyes hardened. The Cho family had him removed. Quietly. Cleanly. And walked away with their hands looking clean while a good man's family paid the price. That's not, Min-Jun started. Your father gave the order, the man said flatly. Don't waste your breath defending him. The room went silent except for Zoe's soft, frightened breathing. Amara felt something crack open inside her chest, grief and rage tangled together in a way she had no name for. I didn't know, Min-Jun said quietly, and for the first time, Amara believed him completely. But I know now. And I will make it right. It was Haewon who arrived 20 minutes later, flanked by men Amara didn't recognize, her face carved from something harder than stone. She walked straight past her son, straight past the armed man, and knelt in front of Zoe. You must be brave like your mother, she said softly, and something in her voice had changed entirely from the woman who once measured Amara like a flaw in a stone. She looked up, meeting Amara's eyes. I am sorry for what my husband did to your family. I did not know the full truth until tonight. But I am telling you now, in front of witnesses, that this ends here. What followed happened fast, an exchange of words Amara didn't fully understand, old debts settled, old fears finally spoken aloud between two families who had circled each other with knives for decades. By the time the sun came up, Zoe was asleep in the back seat of Min-Jun's car, safe, and Amara sat beside him in exhausted, hollowed-out silence. I understand if you can't forgive my family, he said quietly. I understand if you can't forgive me for not knowing sooner. Amara reached over and took his hand, the same way he had taken hers on that porch weeks earlier. You didn't do this, she said softly. And you didn't run from it either. That matters more than you know. A few months later, in a small church filled with people who had somehow become family, Amara stood at the altar in white, the bracelet Min-Jun once buried with grief now sitting warm on her wrist, given back to her as a promise instead of a memory. When Haewon rose from the front pew and reached for her hand, there was no coldness left in her eyes, only quiet pride. Sometimes the family we're afraid of becomes the family that saves us, and sometimes love asks us to forgive things we never imagined we could survive. Amara learned that being chosen isn't about being perfect or powerful. It's about being real, even when the truth is messy, even when it costs everything. What would you have done in Amara's place? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. If this story moved you, there's another one waiting on this channel right now that I think you're going to love just as much. Go check it out, and I'll see you in the next story.